Women's Working Group on Financing for Development, and one of your hosts. And I'm here with my colleague Laura Moncada from Venezuela. She will introduce herself later, and she's done a fantastic job in trying to conceive this session for you all, to try to dig deeper into these issues. I just want to start, before starting, I just want to say that this is a safe space, so we have some rules here, just to ground rules for everybody to feel safe. This is a space that is free of discrimination of any kind. This is a space in which everybody should be welcomed. Any expression of discrimination will not be tolerated, and we will give you a heads up if we think that there is something that is breaking the safety guidelines. And but if you do not abide by them, we will have to remove you from the call. But other than that, we are extremely grateful that you are here, and please try to listen to each other and be respectful with the different views that will be expressed here. This is a topic that is also very crucial for the feminist movement, because as you've seen, we're in a world where everything is interconnected. Last 2 weeks ago, the IPCC report was released and warned us, the intergovernmental
Hello everyone, my name is Laura Monca. I'm going to be co-moderating this session with Amelia. I think she's having some trouble with Wi-Fi issues. So in the meantime, it's great to see you, all of you joining from different parts of the world, sharing your organizations and sharing your work. It's amazing to see your commitment just by joining the session and bringing different perspectives on the issue of economic justice and rights. So I can introduce myself while Emilia tries to join the session again. But my name is Laura Moncada, and I'm a gender equality and climate action activist from Venezuela. I work with UN Women. I'm a youth advisor there, currently helping create a new body that is going to help the youth representation in decision-making spaces. But I'm also a regional leader for Girl Up. And I work with mostly, like, my areas of activism fall between gender-based violence and economic justice and rights. So we're gonna be we want to have a conversation that is intersectional, that is inclusive, that takes into account, of course, the consequences of the pandemic, but also climate change effects on women's participation in the workforce, but also their work at home. So we're gonna go into brief presentations, and then we're gonna have some breakout sessions where you're going to be able to discuss with one another and kind of share your ideas, what you're doing, ways to collaborate, and so on. And we're gonna be passing through these breakout sessions and just checking if anybody needs help or if anyone has any questions on the presentations, because the idea is to inform and educate each other, but also empower each other and create new ways of collaboration. So yeah.
Apologies, Laura, I felt from the internet, but now I'm back. My computer decided to renovate the internet at this moment, so apologies for that. Just wanna thank you for stepping in, Laura. And just wanna finish up the overall presentation, and then Laura is gonna give us a very informative view of the issues also at hand, so that we can all go into the discussion. So I was saying that it is very clear from our feminist view that everything is interconnected, and the way this economic system is also impacting on the environment. This leads us to the topic of this this session on the Commission of the Status of Women about how there is a connection between climate, environment, and disaster risk reduction. And so we want to pose some issues here for all of us to consider. First of all, I just wanted to present my background, my Zoom background. It is a scheme of the way economies work from a feminist perspective. So all of the yellow section here in the back is the non-monetized value, the value that is produced by women in unpaid domestic and care work. And as you see, we know that of now that women are upholding the entire economy. And this is the segment of monetized economy. This is where the formal economy maps everything that is produced and sold in the markets. But what women are doing is really upholding life, not only caring for life, procuring life and human life, but also the life of in the planet. So this is why to us is really important to ensure that we consider in our economic views this macro perspective that the feminist traditions are adding to the discussion on economic issues, and not just the narrow economic orthodoxy that is just limiting to the segments in the markets in which mostly masculinized labor force are considered. But we also know that in the formal economy, let us say in the money where money is exchanged for values, it's also very well known that women are part of the 60% of the informal labor. So rather 60% of the people in informal labor are women, and that is also adding extra pressures on women on having access to, on the one hand, social protection, formalities for access to health and care, and even puts them in danger with many sectors, because sometimes this exposes women to extreme conditions of violence and insecurity and poverty. But on the other end, when you have the formal labor, women are also suffering from many inequality gaps, for instance, salary gaps, the gaps in access to decision making. We know that there are no parity in the formal schemes of power. And this is also very concerning, because in the overall scheme, we know then that women are on the receiving end of all of the negative impacts of inequalities. And actually, we have very striking figures. For instance, 10% of the money that circulates in the world is in the hands of women. Only 10% of the money that circulates in the world. And so this is very striking when we see that women are upholding the entire economy, and then they're just in a very bad space in considering the entire economic system. And they're also owners of only 2% of the arable land that exists in the world. And this relates as well in the way it's not only about having access to resources, but it also tells us about the very unequal way that power is distributed in the world. So this is where our calls for redistribution, but also for reparation, is very important. And just wanted to highlight that for us, it's also very important to have an intersectional view, because another figure that we already know is very important, that is that in the matter of the environmental agenda, 6% of the population in the world are indigenous peoples, and they uphold 80% of the biodiversity in the world. And this is something that we need to recognize, that we are living out of borrowed of the labor of someone else. It's indigenous peoples, the ones that have been actually having this sustainable way to engage with the surroundings and their societies internally. But we know how discrimination is also maiming their quality of life. So these are some macro figures that we thought it was really important to place here, because sometimes when we think about economy, we think that it's only pertaining our national space, our local space, but there are realities and challenges that no country or no region alone can face on their own. And this is why gender equality is one of those. Gender equality is not a local issue, is not a cultural issue, it's not a national issue. Gender equality is a macro issue, it's a global challenge, and it has to be dealt with national policies, but also with regional views and with global redistribution of power. And we also know that we're in a very dire moments. For instance, with the pandemic, it was very clear that the global north concentrated all of their resources for the survival. So now we came up with a very complex chain of events, from the depredation of the environment, and then an economic crisis in which the developed countries thrived because they kept all of the funding for recovery. They allocated that to those who are the most wealthy and those who were benefiting the most. So we have very striking figures as of the concentration and the hoarding of vaccines. And this has had a tremendous impact now in these past 2 years about the conditions in which developing countries are at, especially the least developed countries and the small island developing states. And this is why we also think that there are many conversations happening now in not in other economic spaces. For instance, the WTO discussing a TRIPS waiver, which would be very crucial for upholding the economies of the developing countries, because without health, the countries cannot just keep on going on survival mode. So that is something that is very key, and is interconnected, because also governments have been meeting these pandemics with lower rates of labor force engaging, and therefore weakening the capacity for spending for human rights, for equality, for health, for education, and even to sustain the environment and promote comprehensive environmental policies to address climate change, but also adaptation and maintain environmental integrity. So these issues are very crucial, and I just wanted to put in here a broader landscape. So when we go into breakout groups, we do not only limit ourselves in talking about the national conditions or the local conditions. It's rather the way in which how our local situation and solutions can also help impact a broader landscape. So we're talking also about global justice, and we're talking not only about the sexual division of labor, but also the global division of labor, with the global north extracting all of the resources through many means, like debt, and them getting all of the payment of the debt services, or through illicit financial flows, and they becoming tax havens. So there are many ways in which the global north keeps on extracting and avoiding the responsibility for helping the global south to thrive in these moments. But also we're seeing in CSW how they're rejecting everything related to climate finance, to loss and damage, and everything related to their historical responsibility. So on behalf of our agendas, I'm saying, no, it's very important to go on national action. Climate change and environmental crisis are not going to be solved through national action. It has to be solved with climate global justice, with global action. And this is also something that we need to discuss in here, because whatever it is related to environment, it has a deep correlation with economic agendas. And this is the element that we wanted to also bring up to the discussion with you. So I'm gonna stop here and give the mic to my colleague Laura, and she will have a presentation as well on other elements of the economic agenda, and then we will go into the breakout groups. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for your amazing presentation and for passing the mic. I'm gonna share my screen because I have a presentation. But just to follow up with my colleague, I just want to go in a couple of statistics and also give a general understanding of the issue of economic justice and rights, and then add like a pandemic and climate change perspective. So here are some statistics that I found are really interesting and also very daunting for all of us. So we can see how women are, well, all of us are over 200, almost 300 years away from achieving gender parity in the area of economic participation and opportunity. Also, there's obviously a big gender wage gap that we have to take into consideration, but then apart from that, there's a disproportionate share of unpaid care work that is still falling on women's shoulders during the pandemic. And that is something that happened before the pandemic, but that was exacerbated by COVID-19. And then on top of that, the reality of having to manage unpaid work with paid work, and then taking care of the children and teaching some of the people at home. So that's a lot of work that goes into the impact of women's realities. There's also another statistic that I wanted to add around the fact of COVID-19, and is that around 35 million women and girls will be living on less than almost $2 a day, and they will be pushed into poverty as a result of COVID-19. And then 80% of people displaced by climate change are women, which I think is important to note, because as you may or may not have heard, women and girls are the face of climate change. So just some of the keywords that we're gonna be using today. We have the motherhood penalty, which is or means all of the cultural, political, and economic kind of discrimination that women might face in the workforce. But also there's the mommy tax, which is all the money that women or mothers in this case lose just because they're mothers. And then gender-based violence and the mommy track. So mommy track is basically the challenge of that women face in the workforce for being moms. And this basically goes on to say that sometimes they might not be able to keep going on ranks or apply to certain jobs because they're mothers. So just to keep that in mind. So this is something that kind of came up to me last year in NGO CSW. We're talking about how women fall into this poverty cycle, into this poverty cycle. This is something that it's a theory of mine, but something that I've seen very, very often in these conversations. And it's the fact that the way that women are treated since they're girls and then grow up to be and participate in the workforce, kind of like they end up in a poverty cycle. So let's just imagine a girl, and if you're a woman or a girl, imagine yourself in this spot. You're raised to become a mother at some point in your life, and then that's how our families and our cultures kind of raise us. Then we enter the workforce where we face discrimination, stigmas, prejudices, and even if we get a job, we face a lot of discrimination in this job. And then if we get pregnant, then we face challenges to get promoted. And then apart from that, there's already a gender wage gap for women who do the same job as men. So mothers face this motherhood penalty, the mommy tax, the mommy track that I was talking about in the beginning. And then apart from that, it is very hard for women to get promoted. And apart from being paid less, women face discrimination in the workforce and are undermined in their opinion, exploring for important tasks because of their gender. So women are thought to contribute to not, like, their contributions are thought to not be as important as men just because of their gender, and also because they're mothers. So there is a huge gap between maternity and paternity leave, which we also have to take into consideration. Then things start to get worse when the bosses and the leaders use women already vulnerable positions and their power of authority as a leverage to take advantage of women. This includes gender-based violence, and also harassment and other ways, just because of these vulnerable positions. Then women who make less money than their husbands, and women who work at home only are also put in a vulnerable position. So they can also fall into gender-based violence at home, which with COVID-19 can increases. Moms, if a mother, for example, wants to get a divorce, she can fall in a poverty cycle just because her work at home is not officially recognized, and it's not counted toward their gains. Single moms also have to work more and sometimes still fall in the poverty lines. So let's just imagine this as a cycle that a girl or a woman has to go through. So ever since she's raised as a girl to become a mother, to apply to jobs, during the job, after losing a job, while getting married, while having children, all of these challenges just increase the line for them to end up in a poverty cycle, which is very dangerous because we see a cycle here that, as Emilia was saying, gender inequality or gender equality is not a cultural issue, but the root is for sure cultural. So just to keep this in mind as we enter the discussion and in the breakout sessions. And on top of this, of course, take into consideration other challenges that exacerbate this already poverty cycle, which are climate change effects and displacement, COVID-19 increasing gender-based violence and responsibilities at home, and then other cultural issues like female genital mutilation and so on. So these are some laws that affect women throughout their working lives. And I'm not going to go one by one through them, but I just wanted to show you how all of these different issues affect women in the issue of women's economic rights and how they can work together. And then finally, I just know that all of this sounds very haunting and very, very, very a little bit discouraging for a lot of us. But I just want to give you hope. There's a very recent UN report that estimates that by 2030, over 150 million women and girls could be lifted out of poverty by implementing a comprehensive strategy focused on improving access to education, family planning, fair and equal wages, and family welfare transfers. This means that if we do put in the work, we can change this reality. So now we're gonna go into breakout sessions. So these are the 3 questions that we would like for you to discuss in your breakout sessions to get deeper. But obviously, if you have any other issues that you want to raise or you want to get into a more specific issue, we would love that too, because the ideas for the breakout sessions is to exchange knowledge, but also find ways to collaborate and bring the change that we want to see in the world. So these are the questions. So what do you think are the biggest threats that climate change effects pose for women's participation in the workforce and the economy? So it could be that could be access to water and so on. But this obviously will change depending on your reality, your perspective, and your knowledge. And we would love to see all of your responses. Then we have, what are your proposals with a feminist lens to address the systemic global challenges that women face in terms of economic justice and rights? So you can share kind of like the proposals that you've been working on or that you have, but you would like to work on, and kind of connecting that second question with the last one. What are some ways that we can collaborate to push forward our solutions? So I'm gonna put these questions in the chat just for you to also bring them into the breakout sessions. And then, yeah, well, I'm gonna be passing through the different breakout sessions just in case you have questions or just to see how the conversation is going. Remember to be very respectful of different views, different perspectives, and different backgrounds, and make sure to be courageous to share your solutions and your ideas. Try to make the most out of this. So see you in the breakout sessions.
Okay, breakout rooms are open and you should see a join button to join your room.